video we're going to make today, we're going to tie the rusty spinner. The rusty spinner is my single most productive pattern. I catch more fish on this pattern every summer than most of my all my other patterns combined almost. It's mainly I fish in the evening, so I fish a lot of spinner falls, but yeah, this pattern is extremely effective for a multiple mayfly hatches. It with the exception of just a couple, most of your spinners are going to be a dark bodied spinner. So this rusty spinner is really good for that. I tie these from size 14 all the way down to size 20. Like I said, that range of sizes will cover just about any spinner fall that may occur. Some of the things that I see with people tying this pattern is they tie it way too bulky. You want to keep your body and your wing as sparse as possible. All you need is a silhouette. You don't need a big bulky body. It doesn't need to stand out. It just needs to have a silhouette on the water in the evening, and the fish will the fish will go for it. I used to tie this a lot bulkier, and I had many evenings where the fish were turning away from it. I started tying it several years ago. I started tying it like this, and I rarely have refusals in the evening. Now I do even tie a more sparse version than this, where I use just thread for a body, and then I'll use some organza for the wing. And it's really effective, like late summer when the water levels drop and the fish are getting a little bit more particular about what patterns they're taking. So let's go look at the materials that we need to tie this. All right, it doesn't take a lot of materials. The first thing, I'm using a Danville 70 denier thread in rusty brown. My body is going to be a superfine rusty brown color dubbing. My tail is essentially microfibets. In this case, I'm using a paintbrush that has the fivets on the bristles on the paintbrush are essentially microfibets. They look and act the same way. So I use a lot of these paintbrushes. You have to look through paintbrushes though to make sure that you find the one that that has that taper in the end. A lot of them don't have a taper in the end. The ends are split, but you can find them if you look hard enough. And then the body or the wing is this is Fentex yarn. This is a polypropylene yarn. I also use a polyethylene yarn, which is Bonnie braid macrame cord. That that Bonnie braid macrame cord is I can't tell the difference between it and EP fibers. It's very similar, if not identical to EP fibers. So I use that a lot also. All right, so let's start tying the pattern. Okay, so we're gonna put a size 14 standard dry fly hook in the vise. And first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a layer of thread down, leave a little space behind the eye, and just work. Have a nice layer of thread, thin layer. Go ahead, spin your bobbin counterclockwise to flatten your thread. That just makes it a more of a um, it just makes it less bulky. It's a more smooth body. It's going to be a lot less bulky in the final product if your underbody is not bulky. All right, so we're going to put in our tail. So I'm going to move back up about halfway, and then I'm going to select four of the micro fivets or the paintbrush bristles in this case. And once you have four, You can cut them out. Make sure they're all the same length. Now, the tail in the spinner, I like my tail to be 1.25 to 1.5 times the length of the hook. You want a longer tail. The spinner patterns have a longer tail. So I always go with a little bit longer tail. So I usually go about 1.25. So I'll measure that out, and then I'm going to hold that up at a little bit of a angle down on my side of the hook shank. I'm going to take a loose wrap, and then my second wrap, I'm going to apply pressure, and I'm going to roll that up on top of the hook shank. And as soon as that rolls on top where I want it, I ease up on pressure and finish my wrap. Now I can hold that up, hold that in place, and I can continue to wrap back. And you want to go back to where the bend starts. And then you can come up, and then I'll tie that in, and I'll tie it just where I'm going to tie in my wing, because I want to continue to have a nice, smooth underbody with no lumps, no bumps. Just keep it nice and smooth. Keep that thread flattened, and it'll it'll create a nice body. Now we're going to split our tails. So how you do that is I fold the tail up, and that'll split them, separate them, and then you just split them two on each side of the hook shank. I got an extra one here. We'll just cut that out. All right, so once I have them on both sides of the hook shank, I can now I can do crossing patterns, round with loose, and I'm just pulling tight. Once I get that thread back up, I'm pulling tight, holding it in place, and that kind of separates them and keeps them separated. Now I'm gonna post my tail, much like you post a wing on a dry fly. So I'm gonna come around with a loose wrap. And I'm going to come around again, and then I'm going to hold it and pull tight. That kind of posts that tail, and it won't go anywhere. Again, on the near side, come around twice and hold it, pull tight. And if you pull too tight, it's going to move it. So just pull tight enough to keep that in place. And now take a few wraps to essentially save your place. And then we can kind of help fill in that kind of little bump at the end. So we fill it in with a few thread wraps to kind of make it even. Now what I do is I'll take a little bit of head cement, or in this case, I'm going to use just a little touch of super glue, and I just touch right there. That's all you need. And that once that dries, those wings will stay separated, and they won't have you won't have any trouble with them. All right, now we're going to take our dubbing, and we're going to use very little, just barely coating the thread with dubbing. Very little dubbing. More is not better. And when you're dealing with dubbing, a lot of new people when they're just starting, some of the classes that I teach, the biggest mistake, and they all make it, and everyone makes it, and I made it when I first started, is you use way too much dubbing. You really should barely see. If you can see, you can barely see that dubbing on my thumb. That's the amount that you want to apply to the thread, and that just colors the thread, and it'll allow you to wrap and make a nice sparse body that's not bulky. Um, and that's what we're looking for most patterns. There's some patterns where you want a more bulky body, but most patterns you want as sparse as possible to make a nice smooth non-bulky body. So our first wrap, once we get to our dubbing, we're going to wrap back. First wrap's going to be right in front of the tail, and we're going to just start wrapping forward. And we want a little bit of a taper, but we don't really want too much of a taper. We want sort of a straight body, but it's going to naturally, as you move up, it's going to naturally produce a little bit of a taper, and that's okay. And then we're going to add a little bit more dubbing, and we're going to stop about one to just a little bit more than one eye length behind the eye. Back and just make a, and we can stop there. You see that it's just a nice smooth body with a little bit of taper. Now it tapers back down on the front, but that's going to be covered. So we're gonna fix that as we go. Now we're going to take our Fentex wing. Now this Fentex comes, if you look at it, it comes in multiple strands. It comes in three strands. Um, what you want to do is separate those three strands, and we're only using one strand. And you want to take a comb and you want to comb that out. So it kind of makes it a little more spread out. It just makes it a little more realistic wing. And then we're going to tie that in. I just make it as long as maybe about an inch and a half long, and you can trim it at the end. Now we're going to spin our thread counterclockwise so it jumps towards our material, not away. We're going to make a loose wrap. And we're going to make figure eight wraps on top. We're just going to get that locked into place with some figure eight wraps holding it. And as we wrap our figure eights, more figure eight wraps, we're going to make it pull a little bit tighter until we get tight wraps, and then it'll be locked in place. Just like that. Okay. Now we're going to take a little bit more dubbing, and we're going to make a thorax. Again, our thorax should just be enough to finish that little bit of taper and to cover all our thread wraps, and not much more. Use a little bit sparse dubbing like we did with the abdomen. And if we have to add more, we add more, but we just want to, maybe I have an inch to an inch and a half dubbing noodle here, and I'm going to make crossing wraps with the dubbing. And then I'm gonna, if we see that, you see behind it, there's a gap there right behind the wing. So I'm gonna take my dubbing and I'm gonna fill that in. And then I'm gonna come back up with some crossing wraps, but I need a little bit more dubbing. Now what I do right now is I flip it over and I look at the underside, and you see that underside, you see there's still a gap there. It's not full of, it's not filled with dubbing. It looks like there's a big crater there. So you always want to look at the underside of these patterns when you're tying the crossing wraps, because it's so easy to tie a beautiful top side of your fly, but then when you get to the bottom, it there's that big crater like we saw. So fill that in, and once you fill that in, then you're pretty good. It usually covers the top and the bottom, like so. Now we come up and we just take a few thread wraps. You don't need a very big head here. And then we can whip finish. Just a 3 or 4 turn whip finish is all you need. And then the final step is you take your wing, and I just pull it up and I just kind of guess. I want my wing about as long as the hook shank. I just kind of make a guess. And when you trim it, don't pull it really, really super tight, or it's going to be shorter than you think. So just ease up just enough tension to hold it up, and then cut your wing. And if it's too big, you can always just retrim it. But I think that's pretty decent. That's your completed fly. Now I'll take a drop of head cement and I'll put on the eye, but I don't have any in front of me. But yeah, I usually just put a little drop of thin goop or whatever head cement you use. And so once that glue dries at the tail, those tails are going to remain split. And there's a nice transition there from the tail up to the head. That's it. That's the pattern. Very easy, very simple, very few materials. It's a great pattern to when you're first starting out in tying. It's a great pattern to learn how to tie because it is fairly simple. There's a few techniques that you'll learn and you'll actually advance as you move forward. You'll use those techniques. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, take care and have a good night.